Welcome back to LaidOPEN Podcast. I'm your host, Charna Casal, and today's guest is Micah Larsen. She's a writer and podcaster who reveals the taboos of women's health and healthcare, like menopause, diet culture, and beauty standards. And her podcast is called Modern Hysteria. Micah Larsen is a remarkable woman who courageously chooses to share her story and do a deep dive into the taboos of women's health and medical misogyny and taboos that don't often get talked about because there's so much shame that women feel, or there's a lack of information and research that our medical field is doing on behalf of women. Also want to put out a warning for people who are sensitive and feeling like some heavy material would be too much right now. You can always listen to it in small doses or decide to listen to it on a different day. But ultimately, it's pretty inspiring, and hoping that a women's medical rights movement gets started soon. It feels like we're on the brink. Welcome, Micah.
Learn how to live embodied. Your life is about to unwind. Uncover new tools and start healing. Leave trauma and tension behind. Isn't it great, laid open? Let all your desires come true. How can you live laid open? Imagine yourself brand new. Imagine yourself brand new.
So you're the host of Modern Hysteria podcast,
Yes.
and I'm really curious how that started. What inspired you to want to put your voice out into the world this way?
That's a great question. It's a long story, but I have had, over the past decade, a lot of experiences in which I now feel like I've slipped through the cracks of the system of women's healthcare. And it has had some very difficult consequences. And so much of that time, Charna, I felt like I was so alone, and I kept doubting myself because in isolation, you just think, oh, well, this just must be an isolated experience and this is a me problem. And because there's so much silence around so many of the topics having to do with reproductive health and mental health, and I have had a lot of experiences at the intersection of those two things. So I started writing my memoir about this particular decade of my life. So there's so many topics that came up that said, I really want to explore this. I'm fascinated in conversations about IUDs and natural childbirth and perimenopause. And I have so many questions. So my dream was to be able to ask experts all these questions that I assumed if I had, other people had too. And I have always been a question person and a big picture person. And so the podcast was kind of like a side passion project. I'm about to end season 1 and we've surpassed 11,000 downloads. So I'm like, it's become something where we're having conversations and I'm hearing from listeners, oh, this helped me so much to ask the right questions of my provider at this appointment. I also feel that I may not have made it through a lot of those experiences had I not had immense privilege. One of those pieces of privilege being my husband is a physician, and he has been an incredible advocate for me and done everything that he can to use his privilege to get me the care I needed, and also like translates so much of the experience and like the medical jargon and the health insurance stuff too, Charna. So I don't know how people navigate this without that. I don't think that I could have done it. I don't think that I could have survived it. So I want to speak from that place of, here's where I am. I wish I knew this 10 years ago. We're not having conversations about period pain, endometriosis, postpartum psychosis. Let's talk about it. I'm going to ask people who know. That's the short answer.
Yeah. And I want to get into a lot of the different things that you talked about. And one of the things that I think is so important that is your passion is having conversations about taboo topics, right? The things that remain silent and don't get attention, not only because there's not the funding, there's not the research done, but also because there's so much shame around all the topics that you mentioned. I know that incontinence is one of your highest downloads, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. So think about it, everybody, right? You push a baby out, and your pelvic floor is something that helps you contain, and and you can get into more of the details of all of that. But the point being, it's like the ways that women use their bodies to give back and to produce life has long-term consequence, and none of that is getting discussed.
No, it is fascinating to me to see just on the analytics side, what are people responding to? And across the board, the most by far downloaded, streamed episodes are about pelvic issues.
Yeah.
And that says a lot to me. I'm paying attention to that because I want to ask more questions about what my audience is Gen X and Gen Y, women who have had interactions with the healthcare system. And just the sheer number of questions I get about issues like, is my vagina normal? Or is it normal to have this change in my libido during menopause? And yeah, I can't jump on the trampoline without peeing. Is this normal? Is this normal? And a common thread that I found in this podcast is common, but not normal. So yeah, having incontinence after childbirth, or postpartum depression, or depression during perimenopause, common, not normal. And that says so much about the experiences of women and people assigned female at birth in our healthcare system. And I'm never afraid to dive into my own personal experiences because I have a lot of questions too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that you said it well, which is like, if I have these questions, then there are so many others out there, right? There's something I remember in high school, I wrote a letter into a magazine. I can't remember the name of the magazine. It was kind of like a edgy teen Mademoiselle, whatever, Cosmo magazine. Bust, maybe it was called. Anyways, and I learned that for every person who writes a letter, there's like at least 100 people that have the same opinion or the same thought. And I'm sure the number is, bigger than that. Anyways, I'll just say that there are conversations that previous generations have not engaged in regarding menopause and women's health. And there was just I have to lie here and tolerate it. And there are just so many horror stories of what was normalized, by like my mother or her generation, the boomers. And there's so much more permission as we keep asking questions. It grants more permission to the next generation. And as we go, wait, there's something not okay here. And that's what, your podcast is a big stand for that. And so I really, really appreciate it. So
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I started dealing with gynecological problems in high school. And, there were a lot of assumptions made about me and my body, and, like misinformation and the ways that we would treat. I had a client come to me who was being encouraged to have a double mastectomy and a hysterectomy because she had certain markers for cancer and her mother had cancer multiple times, and she was in her 20s. And then it raises all the questions about, can she and will she freeze her eggs? Will she make that choice? And then how they would treat that 15 years ago when I started working with her versus what they would recommend, what the treatment is now is completely different. And just curious to hear from you, because you went into you had surgical menopause.
Yeah.
If you could speak about that, about your experience with that, and then also what you know in terms of how that's being addressed, the conversation around menopause is being addressed now versus what it was when you started dealing with this.
Yeah, I am so relieved, also like shocked and not surprised at the same time that just a couple weeks ago, The Atlantic had a headline that said menopause is having a moment. And I gave this a keynote address a couple weeks ago and like had that in my presentation. I'm like, yes, menopause is having a moment. Also, as long as there have been females, there has been menopause. So like, thank you. Yes. And wow, it's only like thousands of years overdue. And I am fortunate to be going through this in my personal life at a time when we are having more public conversations about it, and I get to contribute to those conversations about it. I went into surgical menopause when I was 29 because I had these persistent gynecological issues. I had a lot of pain, bloating. I found out later, ovarian cysts. I felt like there was a bowling ball in my pelvis. And this is after I had my son in 2019. And I looked pregnant. I was in pain. I had a lot of anxiety, panic, depression, and paranoia during the luteal phase of my menstrual cycle. And I begged my surgeon to, I thought maybe I had endometriosis, which I actually heard about from my hairstylist. I didn't know what it was. And I brought that to him. And he took me seriously. He did an exploratory laparotomy with a camera. And he was like, I don't see overt endometriosis, but things are messed up in there. Your uterus looks like the size of a 6-month pregnancy. And so we're going to take that out. And I'm going to leave one of your ovaries, the better one, without as many cysts. Because I don't want you to go into menopause at 29 if you don't have to, because it's brutal on your body. You need estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and all of those sex hormones to function normally. And yeah, so when I was 29, I got my fallopian tubes, my uterus, and one ovary taken out. And afterward, my surgeon said, yeah, I could use my gloved fingertip and poke into your uterus and the dent would just stay there. He called it boggy. And I actually still have it. I asked it back to have it back from pathology. It's all cut up and it's in a jar in my office. And it was a very strange time to be menopausal, that I started to have symptoms of menopause because I had one ovary. It was really confusing because I never knew when I was ovulating. And then in 2022, I heard about something on TikTok called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And again, so I found out about endometriosis from my hairstylist. I saw someone post about PMDD on TikTok, and my husband was working the night shift. And I was just Googling it late into the night. What is this? This sounds like my experience, that my mental health just seems to deteriorate every month. Now it's all wacko because I've got one ovary. I don't even know, is it ovulating when and how? And my husband came home from his night shift and he had printed out stacks and stacks of literature on PMDD. He'd never heard of it
Mm.
either. And he's an internist. Yeah. So he works with adult medicine. He's worked in the ICU. So that's not he doesn't work in women's health specifically,
Right.
but he said, you have this. You definitely do. Read this. And I just sat down and started reading the diagnostic criteria. And it was like reading out of my own journal.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I never heard of PMDD. I think now there's maybe a little more conversation about it. But I ended up going back to surgery and having a couple of years later my other ovary taken out. And so but in order to do that, Sharna, am I just going on a monologue?
I'm enjoying your monologue, but there's plenty of things that we could have conversations about in each one of these. You know, one of the things that I would love for you to talk about, because there are other people who have that and don't know the steps to take to actually attend to it. And so a full hysterectomy is one option, right?
Yeah.
And then there might be other things that you've learned along the way in terms of how can someone treat this?
Yes.
You know, which, yeah, I can say more about that in terms of my own experience. But so that's something that I would love for you to address.
Yes. So I was unique in that I was understanding that I had PMDD after I had a hysterectomy. But if you're ovulating, you still have these shifts in your hormones, and premenstrual dysphoric disorder is a hypersensitivity to this change in your levels of estrogen. And the symptoms are emotional, mental, physical, social. In this paperwork my husband printed out was and he was printing all the stuff out from the hospital from UpToDate, which is the medical providers' resources. He printed out the diagnostic criteria. The instructions were to diagnose PMDD, you need several months of data tracking at least, it's like 12 to 16 symptoms every day. And that included paranoia, bloating, breast tenderness, rejection sensitivity, anxiety, depression. So I got to work, and it helped me so much to rate, like every day you rate your intensity of these. And if there's a pattern established where all of these symptoms start to worsen around the luteal phase of your cycle, which I was just guessing at because I didn't know when I was ovulating, then you may have a PMDD diagnosis. And so I took this stack of papers to my OB surgeon's office, and he is wonderful. I spread them all out on the floor to show like month by month by month by month. And he was like, yeah, yep. Okay. And he's very conservative with like he didn't want to put me into menopause. It was kind of like me arguing my case because I was so desperate. I was suicidal once a month, or had suicidal ideation and severe depression, paranoia once a month.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to live like this anymore. And so he took out my ovary. Well, first, so that's kind of the diagnostic process of PMDD. There is no blood test. It's just do your symptoms. You have to be able to check off enough of the symptoms to establish this pattern. And so my surgeon was not totally down to just take my ovary out. He wanted me to go through a test phase, which is when I started taking Lupron injections once a month, which is a nasty drug that is very old. It's often used as a trigger hormone in IVF and egg donation, which is something I had done 10 years prior. So I was familiar with this drug, but it shut down my remaining ovary. And I also have that one. It's in a jar next to my jar with all my other organs, and it is so shrunken. It's like the size of a clear jelly bean. You could see after 6 months of taking these Lupron injections, it was just a defunct, shrunken little thing. But that was like the trial period of menopause, and it was horrible. It was horrible, but it was still better than the unpredictability and my mental health just falling off
Can you say more about that? Because I think that's so important to the fact that as horrible as it was, going into a menopausal state, which I want to get into as well, it was still better than what you were dealing with
Yeah.
every month. And the distinction between those two things, because I think that there's so many myths around like, oh, she's crabby, it's her period, and just like so much minimizing and dismissiveness around how impacted people are during their cycles, and then also how impacted people are during menopause. And if you could speak to the difference between the two, that would be great.
Yeah. So I'm a social scientist by training. So I'm interested in this anyway. It was as I went through this process, I was documenting my state every day. And that was comfortable for me to establish a pattern, understand what's going on. When I started the Lupron injections, insurance was a nightmare. I spent hours and hours. My husband spent hours and hours on the phone trying to get approval for this. Even with the insurance, even with the copay card, they cost $2,000 a month.
Ugh.
And so I didn't even want to do it because I said, like, what about our mortgage? What about our child's college account? Like what? And my husband, bless him, said, this is more important than anything, because he saw me not wanting to live for a part of every month. Yes. So Lupron is a nasty drug. It savagely shuts down the function of your ovary. And so you kind of, your estrogen and estrogen levels go off a cliff. It's an agonist drug. In estrogen levels also correspond with levels of serotonin and other really important hormones that help regulate our emotions and help our brain function. And so I couldn't figure out what was worse for a little while, like being in the hysterectomy solved the problem of my chronic pain and bursting ovarian cysts and the anatomy that was all fused together in my pelvis, which I now know to be adenomyosis. There's a whole origin story there with egg donation, but I lost the plot, Charna. Where was I going with that?
It's okay. So I was asking the difference between your experience, your monthly cycle experience, and when you were starting to experience menopause based on your ovary being shut down, and the distinctions that people can start to have a sense of, like, what are their symptoms? How can I identify if I'm going through this and it's, compared to what I may experience going through menopause. And even as bad as menopause is, you still made that choice.
Yes. Okay. So PMDD, there are a few levels of treatment for this disorder. The first is, I think the first line treatment is try an oral birth control. This, with maybe theoretically, we're leveling out the hormones that your body's getting, so there's not quite a roller coaster during the luteal phase. The second is an antidepressant or other psych meds. Lifestyle optimization. So are you exercising? Are you meditating? There's an endless list there. Are you in therapy? And then, like, the very last page of the recommended treatments is, in rare extreme cases, hysterectomy. It's like it was a footnote. It was an afterthought. I had already arrived there having had a hysterectomy for other reasons. The difference between going through PMDD each month, theoretically, was that between that and menopause, theoretically, was that if I was in surgical menopause and I did hormone replacement therapy, then I would have a steady dose of estrogen in my system every day. So there would not be the cycle would be done. It wouldn't trigger the PMDD. What I didn't understand is that even you still have the mechanism of PMDD even after you have a hysterectomy. Any change in your levels of estrogen, other sex hormones, your sex hormones and your stress hormones are inextricably linked. So I still have that mechanism. I just changed the dose of my hormone replacement therapy and it messed me up pretty bad. So I went into this thinking, and my lovely surgeon, OB, saying, yeah, in theory, we dose you every day with the same exact level of estrogen, and it controls for the PMDD. You can't have PMDD if you don't have a period. And that didn't turn out to be true.
Right.
And menopause, when I was on Lupron, I started to have a lot of the physical aspects of menopause. My bones hurt. My body ached. I was so tired. I couldn't stay awake until 4 p.m. Just the brain fog, nausea. And those things, those are menopause symptoms, but they were greatly exacerbated by plunging into menopause. And rather than going through, I didn't really have perimenopause. I went straight into menopause in 6 weeks. And I stayed on those injections for 6 months. And we introduced some hormone replacement, and things gradually got better. My quality of life now is much better, but I had to seek out a menopause specialist, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of my advice now is, if you are struggling with the physical or mental, emotional symptoms of menopause, please use the Menopause Society's search function to find a trained menopause specialist in your area. I actually travel from Montana to Utah to see mine, but it was life-changing because she's actually able to create an individualized, educated hormone replacement therapy plan, which for me, I know I'm 33, I really need a lot of hormone replacement, but at any age, a lot of those symptoms are treatable. You just need somebody who really knows what they're doing.
What's so enraging to me is that, I'm so happy that you have the resources that you have to pay out of pocket, I'm assuming, for this menopause specialist, because that's definitely not covered by our insurance. The limited testing that our insurance will actually cover, the limited lab work. I was dealing with that yesterday, and I was like, I don't actually feel like I'm dealing with a lot of, in rage and heightened emotions. I'm on HRT. And yesterday I was having fantasies of killing this doctor. I was like, oh, maybe I am on too high a dose of testosterone because I'm having very violent fantasies right now. Or maybe it's just American, the Western medicine, our system. So what's so frustrating is that you have to have that much proof. I'm picturing you laying out all of this paperwork. You had to have the resources to have an educated partner, not just a loving partner, but someone who had access to this material to be able to bring it to you, for you to then try to prove your case to a doctor, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it's maddening. It's like, who has that access, right?
Right. And I have a master's degree. I understand, I am coming at it from a research point of view. I'm certain that my master's degree is in health communication. And so I'm literate in academic research articles. I can navigate that system, and I have had to educate myself a lot. And I wanted to dive into what are the limited studies that we have about what is PMDD? Why does it happen? What is its association with trauma and chronic illness? And what's actually happening in our brains when we're having mental health side effects of menopause?
Yeah.
And that was for my comfort, but also so I can advocate for myself. And I have had the fortune of sometimes having my husband in the room with me. Like that day I went to see my doctor, and I think that my OB surgeon would have treated me the same whether my husband was there or not. I'm fortunate in that because that's not always the case. But people listen to my husband, Eric. He was the chief of medicine at that hospital at the time. And so
of course
he opened doors for me for sure. So I don't know how. And he spent like all day on the phone with insurance companies. So he's very literate in that world. And so how do people navigate this? I don't think that they do, Sharna. I think
they give up and
they give up.
Yeah.
And I can see why. I had all of these resources. I have all this privilege, and still I had a provider 2 separate times, years apart, prescribe me progesterone. Inadvisable. Now I know that while providers are split on this, do women who don't have a womb, who are in menopause, need progesterone? My menopause specialist said no, because it can cause severe mental health fallout. It can cause psychosis. It causes severe depression. And I ended up in the mental hospital in December of 2024. I was there over Christmas because not for the first time, I didn't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
Not just because I was so tired of fighting this battle of the immense effect on my brain and body of all of the missteps and falling through the cracks, but also just because I was in severe recurrent depression and the progesterone didn't help. So I think I've also had a lot of anger about some of the times that my case has been overlooked by providers. In fact, one of the reproductive health topics I am most passionate about is called the last fertility taboo. And that is egg donation. Because I learned not too long ago that PMDD, premature birth, preeclampsia, all of these things that I have experienced can be traced back to 2013 when I donated my eggs. And the reproductive endocrinologist overstimulated me. And I donated 2 to 4 times the recommended amount of eggs. I had something called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And instead of hospitalizing me, he gave me an emergency procedure without anesthetic in a back exam room. And my theory, and the theory of amongst my providers, some of them, is that the enormous amounts of estrogen and hormones and Lupron I was exposed to in 2013.
Yeah.
The fallout from that is kind of got me where I am. And it made me essentially infertile. So had I known that, I don't know if I would have been brave enough to try to have my son, but he's here somehow. I couldn't carry him to term. But I think that I'm open about my story because I think it exposes something that's extremely common, not normal, in our women's healthcare, which is that our bodies are treated as dispensable. And when you complain of, I don't even like the word complain, when you report, I'm having these side effects, this is affecting my body and my brain and my quality of life, that it's not always taken seriously.
Well, and what you're speaking to is, very relevant right now in our political climate regarding like women's bodies not only being dispensable, but it's like they're serving a purpose. They're to produce more children, but women's health, the mother's health, is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're seeing Adriana Smith being held on life-sustaining measures in a hospital in Atlanta against her family's wishes, to my knowledge, that were just, this is what it takes. This isn't the first time this has happened. I worked in the Texas House of Representatives in 2013 to 2014 during my egg donation, when Marlise Munoz was in the same situation down the street from my office at John Peter Smith Hospital in Fort Worth. I wrote about that at my job. And this is what it takes for so many of us to realize that your advance directives in many states don't apply when you're pregnant. If you were to have an accident, if you're pregnant, then all of those things are void and you no longer have the legal right to your advance directives or your own care. And like horrible things have to happen for us to be able to have these conversations publicly.
Yeah, which is absolutely insane, which in case someone doesn't understand what that means, that's basically if you're like, I do not want to be resuscitated if I'm, they think I'm brain dead or something. And basically you have to be kept alive as an incubator.
Mm-hmm.
And your family loses their rights as well.
Yeah.
And has to just witness that. And
yeah.
This is a side question to add insult to injury. I wonder if you then even have to pay the medical bills.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That the surviving family, do they have to pay the medical bills of the person who is being kept alive against her will and their will?
Because I believe so.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's it's totally insane.
Yeah. I know Adriana Smith's family right now has a GoFundMe. I haven't looked at the site yet, but I do know of it. And it is ostensibly to collect money for medical bills. And I was in the hospital for a month before my son was born prematurely. And the day that I was admitted, the nurse was like, oh, don't worry about like your length of stay here because you'll have hit your deductible by lunchtime. And I was like, oh, okay. And the whole thing was $250,000. Like, and that was 1 month and a stay in the NICU. I know Marlise Munoz was on life support, homeostasis support. I don't know if it's really life support from November 2013 to January 2014. And Adriana Smith has been, so she was 9 weeks pregnant. Now she's 21 weeks pregnant. Like there's no end in sight. The only way that the previous case resolved is that Eric Munoz, Marlise Munoz's husband, sued the hospital for like criminal abuse of a corpse. That's the only way he could get her taken, like let her die with dignity.
And I was even in listening to your story, like that's medical abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, and would you go so far as to say, I mean, the definitions of what constitutes sexual assault? Like, I'm curious about if something is being done to your body against your will, or if it's not, if it's not something that you want to happen. I don't know the technicalities of this. I mean, I did a whole episode. There's a really amazing documentary, if you haven't seen it, At Your Cervix. Have you seen this?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you have to see this documentary. I interviewed Imagine, is the name of one of the filmmakers, about pelvic exams that are performed in teaching hospitals while people are anesthetized, like, unconscious. And they've signed a stack of papers when they go in for like their knee surgery, and they're not even aware that could be happening. They could get 100 pelvic exams while they're under.
Yep.
And so that's still happening. That's still legal.
Okay. That is fascinating. I just wrote down the documentary because I'm aware of this. It's definitely on my list of things I want to write about and explore because, add it to the list of ways that we don't really know what informed consent is. I think that's another through line, or we don't often get the opportunity to give our informed consent. That is a through line I have seen in women's healthcare and my own healthcare. And I think the question about sexual assaults and the conversation about consent is very interesting. I am a survivor of sexual assault, and I know that my ability to dissociate when my body is being violated came in handy when it happened so many times in medicine. And like when I was having my eggs retrieved or had that emergency procedure, or yeah, I think that's an excellent question about where can we even consent?
Even a mother going in, dealing with complications, about to give birth, not knowing it's her first child, not knowing what's about to happen, not being given a blow by blow as to what to expect and
Yeah.
what is typical and what is atypical and what's an appropriate amount or expected amount of pain. Like, how do you even know what to ask for when?
Yeah.
If it's your first time or your first experience doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a complicated question.
Yeah. There's so many, I mean, from the time that you hit puberty, like there's so many experiences that we have, or we don't realize that our boundaries are violated. So we should have had boundaries. There's no guidance because we don't talk about, menopause and postpartum care. And that's why I love having so many of the conversations I have with guests on Modern Hysteria is I want to talk about what's a postpartum doula. Didn't know that was a thing when I had my son, but there is a huge effect on postpartum parents' mental health when they have the right community and support. And that's why there are postpartum doulas. We don't know what we don't know. And we don't know what questions to ask.
In this experience, when you think of, I know that I've spoken in the past of birth trauma, my own experience of being born prematurely, and the birth trauma that impacts mothers, right?
Yeah.
What's the fallout? What's the process of what they're going through when you go into premature labor, or you don't know what's happening with your baby. You're in the hospital for a month and that whole experience. And then how does that impact you once the baby's there? Like you don't get an opportunity to process the trauma of all the not knowing and all the fear. You have to go immediately into caring for another being. And so it's like you have to press pause on your experience. But what we know about trauma, it's like, okay, all that energy is just bound in your tissue waiting to be activated. And so then you have hormones that kind of push the button periodically to activate it, right? And then it's like amplified, experience that has been placed on hold and laying latent to be felt.
Well, you said that so perfectly. Yeah, I had the mistaken assumption that, well, to give context, I was 29 weeks pregnant when I was hospitalized with preeclampsia. Now I know, potentially related to egg donation. And kind of every day, every week was, can we go another day before your organs fail? Relatedly, I have wondered if Adriana Smith, that was what got her to the hospital, is that she was complaining of some of the symptoms of preeclampsia and she had blood clots in her brain. That's what happens is if preeclampsia goes untreated, to my knowledge. So they keep you in a special place in the labor and delivery ward called antepartum, which is where the moms who can't give birth yet live until their bodies are not going to survive or the baby's going to come out. So very liminal space, because you're hearing other people give birth and you're hearing babies get rushed into the NICU, and you're kind of just like waiting every day to see what do my labs look like? Can I push it another day to give my baby a better shot at being equipped to be born? And I was so fortunate in that I was able to hold out till 34 weeks. I am very stubborn and willful. And I said, well, I'm going to retain the only control I have over this experience is that I want to do this without an epidural, but I was being induced, 6 weeks early to have my son, and my same doctor, same OB surgeon was like, I respect that so much, your decision, but please know that this is not like you're going into labor naturally. This is like, we are forcing your body to have this baby right now. And I was so dead set on having things go the way that I planned. The only piece of like childbirth that I felt I could control. And so I labored for like 24, 26 hours without pain management. My body kind of gave out at that point, and my blood pressure was over 200 over I don't know what, because I started to lose consciousness, and we lost my son's heartbeat. And so I thought I was dying, and I was close. And so like, I didn't understand the risk of that. So much of that was my responsibility. But after that, I mean, after he was born, he was in the NICU, and I still lived in the hospital to shuffle down there in my Birkenstocks every 2 hours to feed him. And yeah, you go from, I thought that he and I were both dying, to like, okay, but he's out now and you need to feed him. And then we just moved on, and I was a mom, and like, no one ever asked about like, are you okay? And that's one thing I think that drives me now, is that I want to put my story out there and be open about the reality of the fallout, because I want other people who have had that experience. And I've had so many people since, all these aspects of egg donation and preeclampsia and preterm birth and traumatic childbirth and menopause, and say like, me too.
Yeah.
And that it's common, but it's not normal. And yeah, we don't take very good care of new moms, especially those who've experienced traumatic childbirth.
Yeah. I think that you're first of all, I'm glad you're here, and that you made it, and that you're as tenacious and well supported as you are, because you're really making a huge contribution. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like a cockroach or like a horseshoe crab. Like, I am extremely stubborn and hard to kill. I will like just keep coming back. My friends hate when I say that so much. But I am scrappy, and I have so much more story to tell.
Yeah. I mean, there's I feel like we just got into one of the threads. There's so much more that I want to talk to you about. And I think what you just said, that so many women have said me too regarding these topics. And I wonder when there will be a medical Me Too movement.
I think
that's a really important, I mean, I could say like PCOS, polycystic ovaries, me too. Endometriosis, me too. I almost donated eggs in my 20s to a sweet gay couple. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, wow. And I already had all these gynecological issues, and that's the only thing that kept me from doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's this thing of like, you don't know what you were saying. You don't know what you don't know. And when you're young and you decide you're going to do something like that, and you don't have all the information, and there's no medical research that's informing, and the doctors who are doing it are treating you like you're disposable. And, it's really scary.
Yeah. And I think the medical #MeToo movement is coming, because I'm starting to see, and this is probably so swayed by my algorithms and what I'm looking for, what I'm reading. But I see people writing about medical misogyny, and how that's what I do public speaking and write about too, is that it's not about individual providers. It's that the system was truly built in America. The obstetric and gynecological foundations of our medical system were built on the backs of enslaved African women in the South, who were completely unable to consent, obviously, and were used as test subjects. And that legacy never really went away.
Yep.
There's the medical system in education and training still has misogynistic and racist roots. I do not think that it is a coincidence that Marley's Munoz and Adriana Smith,
Right.
who is a Black woman, I don't think it's an accident or it's not a coincidence
Right.
that there's one, Spanish speaking woman and a Black woman who are now emblematic of this horrible treatment of women's bodies.
Yeah. The documentary At Your Cervix gets into that a little bit. And I think it's a really important history for us to know. And it's unfortunately, I feel like we're in the backlash right now, and that it's like the medical Me Too will come, but right
Yes.
now we're in the belly of taking women's rights away, and it's pretty terrifying.
It's terrifying. Yeah, that's why these conversations mean so much to me, because
Yeah.
like, we should give more women microphones because like this allows us to still be connected to each other. And even while it feels like we're in a dumpster fire right now in America, at least like my thought is that's why I'm using my privilege to talk about this, because I can. And I don't want anyone to feel like they're in this by themselves.
Yes, agreed. One of the things, so I was on your podcast and we realized that we share a deep love of gardening. And we just had a really hard conversation that I think may be hard for people to listen to. I want to come back to something that is resourcing and enlivening, right? And so you live in Montana, and I'm just really curious to hear about how your garden, how your home life, how being connected to the land resources you and how it feeds you during this, because this is still an ongoing process that you're in, but also how you landed where you are now.
Oh, this is the greatest question. And I love to talk about our farm. It was actually between my hysterectomy and oophorectomy when we saw a coworker of my husband's said, "I'm selling my farm and I just want you to come look at it." I met my husband in Texas. He actually, like our first date, he was a medical student. I asked him to come to the fertility clinic with me before my egg donation. And then we started dating. And if that doesn't tell you what a patient man he is, or accepting and bomb-proof man he is, then I don't know what will. But he moved to Wyoming to do his residency, and we bought a house there. And then it was my turn to decide where we were going to go after he finished residency. And I fell in love with Missoula, Montana. And this little 3-acre farm, the first time I came here I was feeling really depressed. And it was after my first suicide attempt. And I walked around in the snow on this little historic farm. And I said, I could feel like I could heal here. And so I emptied my business bank account, paying the down payment on this place. And it's like a rambling little kind of rundown farm. I have a farm stand, chickens, ducks, rabbits. We have bees. We've got an orchard. We've got huge gardens. And this is just a hobby farm. But I found myself again, or a new version of myself, when I was able to heal. I think I have been able to heal largely because of this setting. We're in my office right now, which is an outbuilding in the alfalfa field. And I really threw myself into just pulling weeds and making compost and pre-sprouting seeds and gardening and growing food. And that allowed me to be present while I was going through a lot of physical and psychological turmoil, that it was like, it returned me to myself. I paid attention to the seasons. I pay attention to my flax is blooming outside right now. The apricots are growing. It took me out of the past and the future and keeps me in what is happening right now. Mm-hmm. And is there anything more therapeutic than like digging in the dirt with your hands and planting little baby sprouting vegetables while your chickens like are pecking around you? It's just like, this soothes my soul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you have that. I noticed for myself, like just even yesterday, I was really tired and I rallied. Actually, it's like 2 days ago now, but I've noticed for the last 2 days, when I'm super fatigued, if I can rally and get my body into my garden, I wanted to go out and just pick some blueberries for my breakfast. And then next thing you know, I'm harvesting all my strawberries. I have a lot of strawberries. And then I was like, wait a second, I think I actually want to make some nettle soup. So I was like getting my nettle. And then I was weeding. And then I was, and it's like next thing you know, it's been 2 hours and the sun's going down. And I feel better than when I went outside 2 hours prior. And so that's been a repeated lesson and experience for me, is that my system comes alive and perks up. I feel like a plant that's growing towards the sun when I just get myself out into the garden, rather than like, I'm like, oh, I'm just really tired. I think I'll just stay here and just like, like watch a show or,
Yeah.
And even if it's a little thing, like I had a client who kept alive, like had one cucumber on one little plant on her balcony in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that little thing, and attending to something outside of you can also help you if you're feeling physically or emotionally strained or drained to come back to the present moment. Right? It's like, rather than worrying about the past or thinking about the future, you're being in the present moment with that cucumber.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is a question that I ask most of my guests. And given our conversation, what do you consider embodied freedom to be and to mean to you?
I would say something that really shocked me about going through menopause early and intentionally is that I found a lot of freedom in acceptance. In self-acceptance has really forced me to reckon with a lot of my thoughts about my body and beauty culture and diet culture. And because I went through all the series of events that led to premature menopause, it forced me to get clear about, what do I value about myself? Who am I? Like, what legacy do I want to leave? And it's not going to be what I look like. And the freedom to just embrace who I am authentically, to not stop worrying about taking up too much space, stop trying to keep myself small and like fit into some kind of mold, has been so freeing. Does that answer the question?
And it's perfect, because it's, we're talking about a culture that supports women's disembodiment in every possible way, right? Because it's a body you can control. If you're not home, if you're not there,
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And how can listeners find you and your podcast?
Yes. Modern Hysteria is on Substack, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You can find that and more on my website, Micah, Micah, Larsen, Larsen.com. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Micah Larsen _. I'm on TikTok a lot. I found a great community there, and on Instagram a lot. And it's connected me to so many fabulous people like you, Sharna. Yeah. And the podcast, we've covered a lot of really fascinating topics. So I encourage, if you're interested in this conversation, look up Modern Hysteria on your favorite podcast player.
Thank you. So good. And I feel compelled to say, give your husband a hug for me. You know, I'm
Right.
just really, really glad that you've had such a good cheerleader so that you could do the work and be here, you know?
He is truly amazing. He is, yes, he's the love of my life for sure. And he's a great dad.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right.
Yes.
I look forward to future conversations with you.
Yes, me too. Thanks, Sharna.
You're welcome. If you appreciated this episode, you can like, rate, review, and share it with your friends. I'd appreciate that. If you'd like to stay connected, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at LaidOPEN Podcast. That's LaidOPEN Podcast. If you go to charnakassell.com, you can sign up for my newsletter where you can receive discounts and you'll be the first person to receive certain resources and information about upcoming events. And at passionatelife.org, you can get more information about my private practice if you're interested in working with me as a client. And you can learn more about my approach to healing. This has been LaidOPEN Podcast. I'm your host, Charna Cassell. We all have different capacities, but I believe in our capacity to grow and change together. Until next time.